Alright, continuing grade 5 with our understanding of operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Right now we're focusing on the multiplying and dividing part that help us to solve problems in the real world. Today we're going to demonstrate an understanding of using different strategies to mentally multiply two numbers. Mentally, remember, means in your head. Now this can be really tricky for some people, so I'd like you to just try to do as much as you can in your head. As with this entire unit, there are no calculators. At this point, you may use your your multiplication table. So no calculator, but you are able to use your multiplication table to support you. All right, we are Unit 3, Lesson 5, the Connect section. One of the strategies we used with basic facts was halving and doubling, and it's also really a good one to use when you are mentally trying to figure out what an answer is going to be. So for example, say we have 14 times 5. We can actually switch those out. So I could say, well, I know that half of 14 is 7, and I know 5 doubled is 10, so I know 7 times 10 is 70. Which means then 14 times 5 is also 70. So when you look at it, you think, what? How does that work? But when you draw it out, you can see that 14 rows of 5, all you've really done is you've taken this and moved it to the side here, so it becomes 7 rows of 10, which is much easier to figure out than 14 rows of 5. So halving and doubling, but then you have to always, when you're doing multiplication, you half one side, and you double the other side. Okay, so you have to do you have to do both. Okay, let's try another one. 16 times 25. Well, I know 2 groups of 25 is 50, so I'm going to make that 50. And I know 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 times 50 is much easier because I can use my annexing 0 strategy there, which is kind of what we're going for. 8 times 5 is 40. I took off my 1 0. I add my other 0 on. 400. So that works really well. If one of your numbers is like 5, will become 10. Is 25, will become 50. If it becomes a multiple of 10, a number that has a 0 on the end, or even a multiple of 100, 2 zeros on the end, because then we can annex 0 and do our multiplication that way in our head, which works quite easily. And again, if you need to show this kind of work, that's perfectly fine. Sometimes we need that to support ourselves initially before we can actually just get to the point of doing it completely in our head. So if you need to do that, that is perfectly fine. All right. When one factor is close to a multiple of 10 or 100, so a multiple that ends in 0 or 2 zeros, you can use compatible numbers and then compensate. So what that means is, for example, we have 198 packs of baseball cards. Each pack has 5 cards in it, so 198 groups of 5. 200 is 2 more packs of 5. So I could say, okay, I'm going to make 198 into 200. So 200 times 5, I know. 2 times 5 is 10. I took off 2 zeros. I'm adding 2 zeros on. That's 1,000. But I added 2 groups of 5, right? Because 98 from 200 is 2 more. So I added 2 groups of 5. Well, 2 groups of 5 is 10, so I know I have to actually take 10 off of that, which would mean then it's 990. So that's compatible numbers and compensation together for mentally multiplying. And again, if you need to do this kind of thing as your work, to get yourself to the point where eventually you will be able to do this mentally in your head, please do that. It's this regrouping of the numbers and understanding them in a slightly more fluid fashion where you can change things around so that make them easier to work with that I would like to see. That's what we need to practice. Not so much I can't do it in my head, I can't do it in my head, and then you just shut down. It needs to be supported with the work at first, to get to the point where we can do it in our head without showing the work. So make sure that you do this work to support yourself if necessary. All right, we're going to practice with a couple. So press pause and practice with these using whatever strategies you prefer. All right, so you should have pressed pause and practiced with these. If you haven't already done so, please do so now. All right, let's take a look what we could have come up with. So 8 times 44. Well, doubling and halving doesn't work great here because 44 doubled is 88 and 8 halved is 4. That doesn't help me. 44 doesn't work well that way. But I could use compensation. I could add 6 to 44 to make it 60. To make it 50. And I know 8 times 5 is 40, and I add my 0 back on. But I added 6 groups of 8. Well, 6 groups of 8 is 48. So I need to take 48 away here. So I'm going to have to borrow. 10 becomes 9, which makes that 10. So now 2. 9 times 4, or sorry, 9 times 4. 9 minus 4 is 5. So 352 would be my answer there. All right, let's try 9 times 29. Again, doubling and halving doesn't work very well here because 29 times 2 is not going to be a multiple of 10, and 9 times 2 is 18. That's not a multiple of 10. So I'm going to try that adding on part. So I'm going to add 1 here to make this 30. So it's going to be 9 times 30. 9 times 3 is 27. I took off 1 0. I'm adding 1 0. But I'm not quite finished because remember I added 1. So I added 1 group of 9, which means I really just added 9. So I have to take that 9 back off. So I'm going to have to borrow from the 7. It's going to become 6. 10 minus 9 is 1. 6, 1. So it's 261 is my final answer. All right, my last one. 2 times 78. And if I look at this again, doubling and halving doesn't really help me here either. So I'm going to do that compensation compatible numbers. And I'm going to add 2 here to make this 80 times 2. So 2 times 8 I know. 2 times 8 is 16. I add my 0. But I added 2 groups of 2. 2 groups of 2 is 4. So that means I actually have to take 4 off of here. Again, I'm going to have to borrow. 10 minus 4 is 6, 5 minus nothing is 5, and 156 is my final answer. All right, so none of those really worked well with doubling and halving, so I've decided I'm going to give you a little bit more extra practice, and we're going to create some that work well with doubling and halving. So I'd like you to practice with these. All right, press pause and try practicing doubling and halving with these two. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so we know doubling and halving only works really well if we can easily double a number into a multiple of 10 or 100. So it's going to end up being 30, 40, 50, 60, something like that, or 100, 200, 300, something like that. So then it's an easy number to work with. 5 is a good one for that. So 5 I know I can double. I'm going to times 2 on this side, make it 10. Which means the other side I need to half. 42 divided by 2. Well, that's a little tricky, but not bad if I break it apart. 40 divided by 2, well, 40 cut in half is 20. And 2 divided by 2, well, 2 would be 1. So 21 times 10. Well, 21 times 1 I know is 21. I took off 1 0, so I add 1 more. So 210. Again, looking at this next one, well, this I can easily multiply by 2, and it's going to give me 50, which is a multiple of 10. It's an easy number to work with. If I times 2 for this side, I have to divide by 2 for this side. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. Add that 0 back on that I took off, 200. So now you've had some practice with with compensation and compatible numbers, and with doubling and halving with multiplying. Now you are going to go on to the concept practice. You are working on page 90 and 91. Notice the questions. 2A to D, 3, 5A to D, 7A to D, and 11. And this is mentally multiplying numbers. So remember, if you need to do some of the work that I just did with you to show you my thinking, you're welcome to do that. Eventually, with enough practice, you should be able to do it in your head, but that may not be happening for you yet. So don't worry if you need to write some things down to support yourself. Otherwise, normally I want you to show all of your work. In this case, because the goal is to do it mentally in your head, and if you are able to do it mentally in your head, go ahead. Then there does not need to be work. But you will need to be able to explain how you got there. So make sure that you can explain that. If you need to show a little bit of work to be able to explain that, please do. Remember, if you have questions along the way, that you ask. Good luck.